Hey guys, my name is Simon Anderson-Carr. I am the art director at Genius Factor Games. We specialize in mobile, iOS, iPad, and iPhone games and apps. A bit about me. I was born in England, grew up in West Van, moved back to England, did all my college stuff there, and then moved to Australia for a few years, and now I'm back here. I worked in 3 countries. I got 3 passports, and it's pretty expensive. If you guys have any questions at all, just throw them my way. I'll try and answer them as best as I can. So the first game that I worked on was called Reese Kingdom Falling, or Battle for Elysia, depending on when you bought it. You guys, any of you guys heard of this game? No? Okay. Sorry, what? Yes, it's based on a web series that was picked up by Sci-Fi. And I did all the concept art and illustration for that, and a lot of the UI, which kind of falls into what you were talking about being having variety, being able to do lots of different types of things. Another one of the apps that I worked on was called Heart Hero. We developed that for the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, and it teaches people CPR through gameplay and interactive videos. One of the things we like to do at Genius Factor Games is to give back to the community and do charity work sometimes during the year. So this is an example, some examples of some of the concept art I completed for Reese. As you can see, there's some silhouette work there, and a slightly more worked up version of one of the airships that we used in the game. And I think they used that in the TV show as well. So this was some of the first stuff that I did for Genius Factor Games. This is a selection of some of the cards that I completed for Reese as well. Mech design, or mech illustration, steampunk-wise. 3D paint over in the middle, and some creature illustration on the far right there. As well as that, I have my own company called Scar Industries, and I specialize in character concept art and illustration. This is a recent character that I did called Death Witch, and there's the silhouettes, quick silhouettes I did for those, and then a slightly more worked up version of that character, what I consider to be the Witch of Death. My favorite's the one in the middle. And the dress is alive. It's got snakes and stuff in it. It's pretty awesome. This is a selection of some of my illustrations that I've done. As you can see, it's mainly fantasy art based stuff. And you may probably guess that my influences are Frank Frazetta, it's #1. People like Simon Beasley, Zhe Mingwu, I don't know how you say his name. Really good artist. And Feng Zhu, fantastic designer. As well as that, I also got a gallery of my art featured in Heavy Metal magazine, and I was lucky enough to have Simon Beasley who did the cover for that, so that was pretty awesome. And not last Christmas, but the Christmas before, I entered the Megadeth Christmas card competition. I don't know if any of you guys are metalheads, but one of the prizes for winning that competition was Dave Mustaine, who's the lead singer, rang me up on Christmas Day, so that was pretty awesome. I got to say that, you know, entering competitions is pretty helpful, because you have the extra competition. I found that I brought a lot more intensity to the work that I did, simply because of the competition. And also, you know, if there's a prize at the end of it, that's also another incentive to work a little harder. Okay. So I went to art college like a lot of you guys are or have, but I went a long time ago, and I went in England. And at the time, I went to college for illustration, and the fashion then was conceptual art, which is not what it is today. Then conceptual art was a mishmash of graphic design and poorly executed art, with no technical structure underneath it. And for me, I had a real problem with that, because I especially went to college for that, so that I could, at the end of college, get some sort of freelance career going or an on-staff job somewhere. And when I finished college, there was no way that was happening, because I just didn't have the skills that I wanted. So I took some time off, and went traveling, and partied, took odd jobs, did the band thing a lot, but that was okay for a while. And then eventually I had to go back to art, because it's not something that I could ignore forever. I really needed to get back to that. for me, there's nothing like producing art, the high that I get from that. And one of the pieces that I produced during that time was Mr. Batman on the right-hand side there. After a couple of years of doing that, one of my friends contacted me concerning some freelance work. And he worked at a publishing house. And so some of the freelance stuff I did for him, he worked at a pet publishing house. So the first few jobs I did were things like fluffy bunny rabbits, guinea pigs, squirrels, if you believe it, mice running around. And so you can imagine that that's not really in my wheelhouse. And so one of the first things I had to do was to concentrate on the art and not the content, because the content did not interest me at all. And you'll find that when you do jobs for different people, you'll work on games and apps, and you'll be like, I hate this content, it's boring as hell, I want to kill myself. But you're just going to have to concentrate on making the art as good as you can and not worrying about the content, because you're not always going to be able to do the things that you really want to do. So after a while I got taken on by that company, which was really cool, and I found that my skills improved dramatically because essentially I was working all the time, and I started to become a lot more industry savvy. And when I say that, is that I realized that I only had a certain amount of time to get stuff done. I couldn't noodle endlessly like I do on my personal work to try and make it as perfect as possible. And if I wasn't happy with something and the end of the time for the deadline had come, too bad. You need to move on to the next thing, and that's just the way it is. And you'll find that. And I had problems with that to begin with, and so if I wasn't happy with what I was doing, I would simply take it home, or I would try to emulate it at home on the weekends or whatever to improve my skills outside of work. So lessons I learned during this time was basically to know my passion. Obviously my passion is art, and producing the best art that I can in whatever situation I'm in. The reality of commercial art and the fact that you simply cannot spend forever on something. But depending on what it is, if you're doing a concept, it's a quick concept, you may have like an hour to do it. It's not going to be the best thing in the world, but it's going to get the point across to your art director or the modeler. And that opportunities to learn are everywhere, even painting fluffy bunny rabbits. Yes, especially bunny rabbits. There you go. So I was at the publishing house for about a year and a half, 2 years. One of the other graphic designers left, and I was given the opportunity to do some graphic design, and I jumped at that chance because for me it was I wanted to learn the computer, I wanted to learn the programs, I wanted to diversify a bit. And the other reason I wanted to learn it is because it was more money, and I was pretty lazy, and at the time I was pretty lazy anyway, and it was just an easier way for me to make money. But of course, that has its costs as well. And after a while, I started doing a lot more graphic design and doing a lot less illustration. And becoming comfortable with that and lazy. But the trouble with that is that I started to become really frustrated with my career and unfulfilled. And I was making more money, sure, but all I was doing was spending money to make myself feel better because I wasn't doing my art. And so after a while, I started looking for a way back. And for me, a way back was I would go to work, obviously, and do my design. At that time, I was a studio manager in Australia. I'd go home and do my stuff, and try and work up a portfolio that I thought I could start thinking about doing illustration or concept art professionally. So that's what I did. I targeted 3 different industries. In my instance, it was the comic book industry, pinup, and fantasy art. And I did a selection of oil paintings for those industries. And then I finished those up, photographed them with my little digital camera on my balcony, and then made my way down to San Diego Comic-Con in 2007. Okay, so I got there super late, totally stressed out, missed the portfolio review on the Thursday, back there the next day early, and I ran into a guy who's become a really good friend of mine. And he suggested I just go down to the main floor and talk to the exhibitors down there. And I'm glad I did, because I got to speak to some real heavyweights. People like Todd Lockwood, Brom, Justin Sweet, and Kevin Eastman. I didn't know who Kevin Eastman was at this point. I just knew he was a friendly guy who stood behind the heavy metal booth, and he gave me some great feedback as well as the other guys did. And for me, I went down there to see if I could actually do this as a job. And he said if I produce a few more samples that he'd be stick me in his magazine. For me, that was huge. That was like, okay, well, now I can actually do this. I can go back and actually try and get something out of this. But the first thing I had to do was fight the good enough monster. In my case, the good enough monster is thinking that my work was good enough to begin with when it clearly wasn't. There were so many holes in my work that I had to work on. And so once I got rid of him, then I started getting back into a lot of personal study. In my case, it was anatomical studies. It was looking at a lot of artists, reverse engineering their paintings, figuring out their composition, their lighting, all the things that make their work successful and mine not successful. I even copied a few of their paintings just to see how they did stuff, just to get their techniques, to see how they thought, that sort of stuff. I also went back to life drawing, which for me was kind of hard because I was super rusty. In the past, I'd never really got anything out of life drawing. I kind of thought it was a bit of a waste of time, which was stupid because since going back to life drawing, my illustration and anatomy and sense of lighting has improved dramatically. So I can't stress that enough. Life drawing is important, especially if you want to do character design or illustration involving characters. So lessons I learned during that time was not to get comfortable and not to settle for something that was ultimately not really what I wanted to do. And the mentors are everywhere. And then once I committed to what I really wanted to do, I was really surprised how many people were willing to help me to get there. And that will happen for you guys as well. If you fully commit to what you want to do, people will just come out of nowhere and want to help you. So, and of course for me, putting in the time, fully committing and putting in the time and getting your core skills down, if you get those down, then you will be successful. So by 2009, I still had my day job, which was a graphic design job, and the money was coming in, and I got a letter from Heavy Metal saying, yeah, we're going to put you in our magazine, everything seemed to be going pretty good, and then I got laid off from my day job. And so I decided after the shock of that I didn't want to go back to another comfortable position, you know, another comfortable, boring design job where I was ultimately unhappy with what I was doing, and I was going to fully commit and go and do what I wanted, which was concept art and illustration. So the first thing that I did was networking. And going back to what you were talking about, networking is so important. Networking is as important as getting your skills down. Because if no one knows what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you're the best artist in the world, you'll never get anywhere. So networking, what I did was I started joining sketch groups. I worked on some mods from some local game meetups, got my business card set up, got my website set up, started talking to a lot of people, I mean a lot of people. And it wasn't long after that that I got an interview at Genius Factor Games to do a month's contract working on Reese Kingdom Fallen. And that was really, really good for me. But I certainly moved out of my comfort zone because I'd never had a concept art job. And I kind of agreed, well, I had agreed to do 24 paintings in 6 weeks for this game. And I'd never painted much in Photoshop before. So you can imagine that that was a bit of a scary time for me. We were working a lot. I mean, I was working nights, it was weekends, I wasn't sleeping much. And at the start, I was super stressed out about it. But I think about halfway through, I decided that I just changed my mental attitude towards it. And I decided that instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to get this done, it's all going to mess up, what a mistake I've made, I'm never going to be good enough to do this, I decided that I was good enough and it was going to happen and I was going to do whatever it took to make that happen. And once I did that, it made it a lot easier for me because I wasn't battling with myself. And so I stayed on after Reese and worked on a few more things, and after a while the current art director left and I was offered that position, which again was moving out of the comfort zone because I'd not been an art director at a video game company before, obviously. And so that came, you know, with its own set of new things to learn. So for me, the lessons I learned during that period was the change is fundamental, and it's just going to happen. You can't get away from it. And I decided to embrace it rather than trying to not change. And I found that, when I did change, that I had a lot of new opportunities, like you were talking about. And, for me, that was awesome because not only did I get the job that I wanted, I actually improved as an artist dramatically over a short space of time. And improving as an artist is the one thing that I really, really want to do. It's so important to me. And also to be true to myself. Instead of, going the comfortable route, which is very easy, we all got to make money, but in the end, you've got to live with that decision. And I wasn't prepared to live with doing something I didn't want to do anymore. I wanted to be a concept artist, an illustrator, and an art director, and that's what I did. I just went for it. Okay, so that's the end of my talk. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me. Tony.
In the private chat before, you mentioned that your friends and you were doing sketching, they don't really agree with your style. What do you do when people give you some criticism or a suggestion? How do you deal with this?
How do I take criticism? Like anyone, really badly. No, I basically try and filter out what the negative emotional response that I would have to that, and try and just concentrate on the things that they're really trying to tell me. Is my anatomy not good enough? Is the lighting not good enough? I tend to disregard style criticisms because the style doesn't really matter for me. It's all about fundamental core things in your work. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else? Jake?
Is there like an exact moment or day that you remember where you said, I want to do my legal graphic design in Australia? Or was it a slow build-up?
It was a slow build-up, but there was parts where I was managing freelance artists, and I was doing the scheduling, the layouts, the checking, client liaison, everything except for the art. And that was, for me, it was like, well, I want to do the art. I don't want other stuff. I don't mind doing this other stuff if I get to do what I want to do. But I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And half the time when I was getting a freelance artist to try and get my vision, they wouldn't get it. And so it was pretty frustrating for me. And then, I was, for years and years and years, I did graphic design, and it was a slow build-up. I just became more and more and more frustrated with it until I really literally couldn't do it anymore. I didn't want to go to work. Just couldn't handle it. So I didn't have a choice. I had to, for me. Yeah.
How long did you work on your fundamental skills before you decide that you're good enough to create them? Or is it like back and forth?
It is a bit of back and forth. I produced those paintings for the Comic-Con that I told you about, and I went down there, and these guys picked my pictures apart, quite rightfully, because there was a lot of holes in them. And I took those criticisms because they're very helpful, and I went back and I was doing 3 to 4 hours of anatomy studies, painting and drawing every day on top of a full-time job, and weekends. So that was like a year and a half, 2 years, where I was just crazy. About a year and a half, 2 years, and yeah, just continual study. I mean, even now I'll get up and do 2 to 3 hours of painting before I go to work, and I'll do the odd lunchtime or at night. For me, it's not something that I just do when I feel like it. It's a lifestyle.
Do you keep it consistent every day? Is it 5 hours on it?
I'd like to say yes, but it's never like that.
Yeah.
Because life gets in the way. You'll work on a project, have to do overtime, or one day you have to pay bills, or whatever. I try and keep it as consistent as possible because I think momentum is important, especially when you're doing this sort of stuff and you're by yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do you do to keep yourself motivated? I mean, we're all very passionate about stuff that we're interested in. Sometimes, every once in a while, it's kind of
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how do you keep focused? Do you go to see galleries or whatever brings you back to that mindset?
Yeah, I do a variety of things. I'll go to galleries. I'll watch movies. I'll play video games to see how they do their visuals. If I don't feel that I want to do painting that day, then I'll try doing something that's a round painting that isn't actually painting, if that makes any sense.
Like having do you have some sort of like people you know or people you look up to, people you want to kind of catch up to or something like that? Does that help?
Oh God, yeah, definitely. There's plenty of people I look at their work and go, "You guys are freaking amazing. How am I ever going to get there?" And then it's just like, "Well, I am going to get there. It's just going to take the time that it takes, you know." So, yeah.
Along the same lines, but how do you deal with the mental battle with yourself? Sometimes I tend to overly criticize myself and then I end up eating the problems. I'm like sucking forever, you know, I'm going to forget this and stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is there a way for you to like distract yourself and say that, oh yeah, well, I'm improving like yesterday, like, is there a way for you to kind of defeat that mental? See what you do.
Yeah, basically I have a couple of mentors, and I have plenty of friends who do the same sort of thing, and I'll send my work to them and go, "What do you think?" "I think it's crap. What do you think?" And they'll go, "No, no, it's not crap. You need to move this over here," because I'm too close to it, right? I can't see it anymore. I've looked at it for 40, 50 hours, whatever, crazy amount of time, so I can't see it anymore. And how do I change whether I think it's crap or not? I'll look at other people's work and try and compare it. I mean, really compare it. And then, you know, if it's not at the same level, that's okay, because the next painting will be better. You know? I mean, a lot of the stuff I did for San Diego was absolute garbage. I look at it now, it's like, how did I ever get in the magazine? I was terrible. And even the stuff they got in the magazine, I can't even look at it, because I think it's awful by the standards that I am today. And I'll think the same thing in a year's time in the stuff that I'm doing now. But that's good, because you're progressing, right? You're not standing still. So,
People, just to throw my 2 cents in there, people expect too much of themselves too fast, and you expect whatever you're working on to turn out awesome, and a lot of it won't turn out awesome. So it's okay to literally delete it, put it aside, try again. If you're doing thumbnails, they're quick, you're not going to fall in love with your first 30-second thumbnail. I try and pick up paintings the same way. I have probably 20 paintings that I said I was going to finish, and if they're shitty, I just don't work on them. And it's move on to something else. So, some weird twisted way, you have to, I guess, accept that. What's that? Yeah, you pretty much have to. You're only going to slow yourself down if you put too much pressure on yourself.
a lot of really accomplished concept artists and illustrators have plenty of stuff they started and decide, "Oh, that's crap," and just move to the next thing, rather than trying to make something out of nothing. You know? So, I hope that answers your question. Anyone else?
I think I personally get into a lot of trap that's actually exactly the opposite. While I'll start something and very quickly I'll think, "Oh, I'm better at doing something else." Now I'll drop the first thing. Whereas if I just pushed it a little longer,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, that you get into the mindset of just so focus on one thing and forget about other possibilities. But the exact opposite spectrum is where you're just too focused on other things. You just never get anywhere. You can finish a paper.
Yeah.
Just like you never get a portfolio together because you have 50,000 sketches. I know, yeah. You have this goal for yourself, and you have a kind of a mindset of what you want to do. Halfway through it, it's just not like sometimes I like to think of comic book ideas. I'll do a few pages of it. By the third page, the story is stupid, right? So you just not working.
Yeah, everyone does that. Everybody.
Sorry.
Everybody does that. Everybody. Doesn't matter how good you are.